Well, the person with snow on this call is my friend Ken up north in Edmonton, where I cannot believe how much snow you got over Christmas there, Ken.
I didn't pay that much attention.
Yeah,
Ken,
it's been,
stupid up there.
I think it's the 6th snowiest December since they started tracking such things.
Wow.
Yeah, it was just like every day we would get more and more and more. So I think eventually the piles astride my driveway were taller than my Mazda.
Wow. That's pretty awesome.
And then down here, when you get close to the mountains, the weather fronts come up over the peaks and it messes things up and you get what are called Chinooks and it radically changes the weather. So I'm in Western Canada, January 15th, and I'm wearing shorts and short sleeves because it's 50 degrees outside Fahrenheit.
Wow.
And, it's even weirder. We actually had that last week. Actually, well, this week. From like Monday to Thursday, it was into the plus temperatures. So into the, say, 37 to 40 range, Fahrenheit speaking. And then just last night, this big wind whipped in, and now we're back at what is it right now? -7, so probably in the 20s.
Oh, balmy, -7. We're at we're at 35 right now, Fahrenheit.
Well, welcome back to Season 3 of OT After Hours, a podcast about industrial cybersecurity, why it matters, and all of the challenges that it presents. Before we dive into the topic, we should probably go around and introduce ourselves. Of course, we are welcoming back Lance Lamont. Hi, Lance.
Hi, Ken. How you doing?
Doing all right. Freezing my butt off after a nice warm week. So that's how it is.
Yep. Oh, I think I'm supposed to do an introduction here, too. I lead the Special Projects and Protocols team here.
Yes. Well, the listeners have met you before, but
Hi.
Thank you. And
hopefully we
also
get
back.
New ones.
Oh, well, yeah. And Natalie is back as well.
Hey, everyone. Saying hello from Chicago. Nice to be back.
And joining us again, but this it's been a while, so we should reintroduce Mr. Rick Kaun.
Hey, everybody. How you doing?
So now, I think the last time we had you on, you were still titled VP of Sales. But if I understand correctly, now you are it's director, global director. What's the new title?
Yeah. So when you come out of a smaller company and, there's nobody else throat to choke, you get a big title to go with the responsibility of selling everything. When you come to a big org, there's other people to share the throat choking. So you sort of level out a little bit. But yeah, within Rockwell, the remit changes though too, right? So global director of cybersecurity sales, both direct and indirect oversight of the entire 50-ish sellers globally, and in pursuit of the entire global cyber annual number. So the title changes, if it sounds like a downgrade, might be, but in terms of the responsibility and the team we have to leverage and the deliverable, it certainly has gone up from when we were with Verve. So it's actually a lot of fun. And there's some really cool people around the world that I'm hoping to bring to this podcast with you in the future to contribute different voices from around the world on different topics. So hopefully this is the start of a big community helping in this space.
Oh, that'd be awesome. And it's also worth noting, because you did mention the small company to large company, very good tee up there. Another part of that is that we've had a bit of a name change recently, and people who've been following the podcast since last year, will have noticed that late last year, the branding in the podcast app probably would have changed, because I had to go in and I had to redo the podcast logo. Tried to keep the general style and aesthetic of it, but the Verve branding and color scheme went away in favor of Rockwell branding and color scheme. So that happened. We have pretty much now abandoned the Verve branding and labeling in favor of what Rockwell is calling SecureOT. And I was told that, I was told two things, because, the marketing people like to have some input on what is ultimately, a marketing related venture that is this podcast. And one of them was, it would be a good idea to just kind of go into what drove the rename, but then also they put you forward as one of the better people to speak to that. And I'll admit, I'm a little curious myself. What drove the rebrand?
Yeah, fair question. So to do that, I need to give a little bit of background. So prior to Verve's acquisition, Rockwell had been acquiring and building a security program for a while. So the core Rockwell security offering is probably almost 12 or 15 years old. a little bit older than the notion of Verve, which is, from the Verve core is what John rebranded when he came in. But the base product and the people like the Bobs and the Jessica stuff, they've been around since about 2001. No, Bob started in 93. But the notion of Verve and the platform started about 2003 in response to NERCSIP, and then became Verve, and then became bought by Rockwell. Now, in parallel, Rockwell started their own security capabilities about 15 years ago, where they started building what, if you've heard in the portfolio, IDCs, industrial data centers, a lot of network assessment, the CPWE, which is their standard for secure, robust OT networks and stuff like that. So there was a lot of stuff in motion. And then in the last 7 or 8 years, Rockwell started acquiring additional bits and pieces to round out their portfolio. The culmination of which was the Verve acquisition. Not to say that they finally got it right and they finished, but rather they felt that they'd sort of, run the list down and we're in a good spot and want to stop and sort of, reflect and see where they were at. So as we were coming in to Rockwell as part of Verve, Rockwell was looking at their list of components and did what they called a brand strategy review. I think it's called BSR, a business review. Essentially, it's, are we doing the right things? Does it make sense? Is it of value, et cetera? Now, the one they were operating under when they were doing the acquisitions was called String of Pearls. String of Pearls was essentially the concept that if we have a string of pearls, meaning we have the best in class of anything we might need, we could be this, go-to expert for the clients, and we can go get what you need, whether it's a consultative thing or a service or hardware or software. But underlying all that was that most of those were externally created, crafted, managed, et cetera. In other words, we were not stewards of our own ship, right? We partnered with Clarity, we partnered with Clarios or Clarity and Dragos. We partnered with a number of different hardware and models like Fortinet, et cetera. And so it allowed us to be flexible to the client, but it falls short in the notion on two fronts. One was the notion of stickiness within a client. If I sell you something that you can get on the market or from someone else, then I'd better do it really well, or you better really like me. Otherwise, why'd you come back to buy more of it or hire me to help you fix it? But the second was also that, we're then, I don't want to say victim, but we're helpless to the nuances and the directions of product and delivery and components that those other companies choose to go down, right? Like if we were betting on Tenable and they sort of unofficially withdrew from the OT market a year or so ago, we'd be sort of partnered with someone that wasn't, looking at the world the same way we were anymore. So what they realized when they brought in Verve, and actually used John Livingston, our CEO, for a lot of it to help them look, John's background in McKinsey and business analysis and all that stuff. And they redid, because it had been a few years, and they re-looked at the business plan. And the stated objective coming out of that was that, let's not resell other people's stuff. Let's sell our own stuff. We bought enough. We've got some IP now. We also realize that security is a program. It's a never-ending, always-on, continuous evolution. It's about scalability and reliability and stability and whatnot. It's not necessarily about this widget or that block or tackle or component. And so they announced at our very first automation fair, I remember distinctly talking to Matt Kennedy at the time saying, our mission is to be one of the top 3 OT security providers in the market. And we respectfully said to him, well, no offense, but Rockwell Automation doesn't scream OT or security. It doesn't scream vendor neutral, which was sort of implied by that. And it certainly doesn't scream OT. So what are we going to do about it? The BSR talked about pivoting to a different approach to the market, but it also talked about potentially having a brand that was related to security for OT, as opposed to related to just the manufacturing. And I don't mean just in any sort of derogatory way. Rockwell's reputation in the manufacturing space around PLCs, especially in North America, is fantastic. It's been built over 120 years. But, we actually had people, I'm going to one next week, where they said, we thought you were just a PLC company. We had no idea you did all this cool stuff. So there was a couple of notions. One was to sort of relaunch this new collection of capabilities, but the other was also to pivot to the programmatic approach, which SecureOT embodies. And that's kind of where this came to be. So that's the background. I want to pause and see if there's any questions or commentary from anyone else before I dig into a little bit of, what does it mean and how are we positioning it? Because I think that's the next logical step in the story.
I mean, I'm following so far, but Lance, Natalie?
Yeah, I'm following as well. I think there was a couple of acronyms that might have been dropped. So one of them was BSR. So for anyone
Yeah.
not familiar, that stands for Business Strategy Review. So I figured I'd just drop that little tidbit of knowledge in case you didn't know.
There we go.
That's why I keep here to make me look good. No, I fumbled it. I don't think I got it right. So I appreciate you clarifying that. So yes. So one of the things we decided, and the BSR was kind of in motion right around the time they brought Verve in. It took a bit to get to a rebrand. I remember in the run up to this and us formally launching it, and as you know, we did in conjunction with this year's automation fair, getting an internal rundown from Megan and team. Megan Ganser, of course, our formerly Verve marketer, but now all things cyber marketing, reporting to Jenna Dudebois. She went through the list of things that they had done, and it was almost like those joke, like, hey, I won the award, I have a few things to say, and they dropped a scroll and it's 47 pages long, and I'm just like, she was all done, and I said, oh, that's it? I thought you said you were busy. Like, it was sort of just this ridiculously long rebranding and updating and logos, and you, Ken, were one component of that entire list, right? So it was a huge undertaking to try and get done, and so we were busy getting ready, and just the sheer volume of things we needed to do to get it done. Now we need to go and pivot to training and enablement, right? And so it's I think really well done thought process. It's an intent to launch. It took a while. That's why we thought about it, 2 years ago, but announced it this year. But now we're getting into it. The concept of SecureOT, it's a little bit of a play on words. You say it fast enough, SecureOT sounds like security. SecureOT is the umbrella or the brand name, right? And it's intended to convey the broad suite of capabilities, the people, the process, and the technology, the programmatic approach. Now, if you break it down under there, we didn't go and name everything secure something like Apple does, everything's I something. We did name Verve SecureOT platform. There's a couple of reasons for that. Number one, it comes under the SecureOT. Verve is a name nobody really understood what it meant or what it stood for. I mean, it was interesting, but I'm not sure what it related to in terms of OT security. But so we needed something that kind of was at least tied to what it did. So we chose to call it SecureOT platform. Again, it's not the most popular with some people, but other people get it. The second notion, though, was the platform itself. If you look at what it's evolved to and how we're positioning it in the business value and what some of our customers are seeing, and I've got some really cool stories from Automation Fair if we want to circle back to those a little bit later, is that the platform is the foundation, right? It's the foundation that you can pivot into multiple business outcomes, right? So the platform itself is in my opinion, and as biased as that may be, is an unparalleled data collection or repository of multi-dimensional data. And I don't mean multi-dimensional like different layers of the same stack. I mean from different sources, from different perspectives that when tied together allow for very real practical OT analysis. And, we talked a little bit earlier about maybe getting to the IT/OT convergence. This is where the magic happens, right? This is where clients like ours in the food and bev have gone from reactive to proactive, right? So the platform really enables so many other things. Couple of quick examples. It does enable pure, basic, boring blocking and tackling like patching, updating software, disabling users. You can get to more advanced things they're calling in the market, like virtual patching, which is like, tuning parameters because I can't apply the patch, so I disable a service or something. It can also get to, other market buzzwords around things like attack surface, management, which, system hardening, like disabling the guest account, disabling unused network shares. So it can do all those things, but it also feeds data. And there's an entire division working right now with a 3 to 5 year plan on how all of this ties into, we jokingly call it Verve everywhere, or SecureOT platform, to feed things like end of life and lifecycle management, right? I mean, you think about it, multiple amounts of the dollars in our annual is based on spinning equipment and manufacturing equipment. We have clients that have hundreds and thousands of devices out there, no idea what vintage or how many or where or when. And if they're too old, they probably have a lot of risk and a lot of potential downtime. And so helping clients not only to identify, that's really just table stakes, identifying those assets and then measuring that against the other dimensions of information we capture, like the criticality of that asset. A critical safety system has to be dealt with differently than a random, support system or redundant system. We have a client that today is looking at the SecureOT platform, and they can look at a global map and they can see all of their sites with a color code to them. And the color code is gold, silver, and bronze. And that color code relates exactly, directly to the revenue output of those sites. And when they drill in, they can see risk from obsolescence, from configuration, from lack of redundancy. You can look for opportunities for drilling into production capabilities around throughput, output, et cetera. Now you're starting to look at factory of the future, secure digital operations, digital twin, performance improvement, enhancement, et cetera. It's changing the game, right? So platform really is a foundation. It doesn't feed the digital stuff I just mentioned, but it allows you to understand where your heavy hitters are, where the goose that's laying the golden eggs is, what your risk is from multiple vectors, regulatory, obsolescence, configuration, you name it. Uptime, we can see things like system health. I mean, it opens Pandora's boxes up to everything we might want to do. And so the platform is really, really sort of central and very foundational. Now, the rest of SecureOT is intended to capture obviously the full suite of Rockwell capabilities, which there are extensive things we can do. But as we move more towards the future, we want to get more towards what I'm calling the big four, because they are the primary drivers of, to my point earlier, owning our own IP, being able to have our own direction and destiny in the product direction. But also, quite frankly, we get to keep all the profit, all the margin, all the recurring revenue, the intellectual property is ours. We get to, be creative and innovative where we need to for certain clients, and we can say no thank you in other areas, again, as opposed to being at the whim of other products, people that we're selling. And so the big four, the first is a nod towards the programmatic approach that we're getting to, which is the consultative approach. So the one thing we've sort of skipped over in here, and I want to sort of go back to, is the notion of the SDO launch, or Secure Digital Operations. Anyone on this call aware of that?
That's a new TLA for me.
It is as for me as well.
Okay. So the other interesting thing that we did while launching the new brand and pivoting from selling other people's, point solutions to programmatic stuff is we have paired with a couple of other divisions, notably one of the other acquisitions that Rockwell had made, not related to cyber, but related to digital or factory of the future, is Calypso. They've also bought some other software tools that are actually the underlying tools that digital improvements and process improvement make happen. And so there's technically three divisions in SDO. SDO stands for Secure Digital Operations. If you do a quick search, you'll see that I think it's Siemens partnered with Accenture. There's a couple of others to go after what everyone's calling Factory 4.0, Factory of the Future, digitalization. The idea is that everybody wants to get more information, be more efficient, tie their various data sources together. So if you think about just-in-time manufacturing, you can do things like make sure you have enough supply on hand for the what is sometimes a seasonal production run sort of thing. You look at things like FedEx and places that get seasonal peaks and ebbs and flows, and making sure you have enough production and staff online, and that ties into your logistics, whether that's shipping or staffing or raw materials for production facilities. And then out the other side, out the back end, and properly maximizing pricing. Look at things like energy markets and our process clients, where the price of oil and gas or blending different things at petrochemical facilities can have different rates. Being able to pivot to the market faster helps them make more money. And then within a factory, there's also the ability to take data around, if, for example, if you have a 10% range in your output, you want to set your throughput and your speeds and feeds to a point such that you range between, let's say, 87 and 97 of your efficiency, because you didn't want to go over and potentially, break or burn or ruin your product. But what if you could take that 10% and shrink that variability down to 5? Now your 87 to 97 can become 92 to 97, right? And you haven't done anything different on the input, right? These are the things that are driving the access to data, which requires underlying secure infrastructure, secure remote access for these experts, data storage, data lakes, maybe cloud-based storage and analytics for AI. So it's all converging together in the market, and everybody's chasing it. Rockwell, by combining these three orgs, we're not as big a cyber outfit as Accenture. We're certainly bigger than most manufacturers in North America, but not other parts of the globe. However, every one of our competition is having to partner with somebody. So you have, potentially a marriage that works well, and sometimes it doesn't. Whereas with Rockwell, we're all under one roof. We have the ability to clearly state, but also behave like and innovate like the single biggest collection of cyber, digital, and manufacturing experts in the world. And so that allows us to pivot not just at the level we were talking earlier, cyber from reselling to programs, but programs within the context of bigger digital pursuits. Super quick example. That process optimization, one of our friends on the digital side, Lance Rodenfels, was looking at the variable thing I was just telling you about for a kiln drying facility that does gypsum or sheetrock. When you're building your house, you put the nice drywall up for your kids, put holes in it with their toys. And they were potentially overheating their product and wanted a better control over what they had and moisture levels, et cetera. And Lance, God bless him, first thing he says is, well, that sounds great. We can do that for you, but do you have the infrastructure to support the data collection, storage, and presentation? They went, we might not. And immediately we bring in a cyber opportunity. We double the size of that, and we further ingratiate ourselves with this client to help them not just with point solutions or problems, but the entirety of their shareholders' expectations around more stable, more profitable, more predictable output, revenue, growth, et cetera. So it's a really part of a much bigger, really cool thing.
Yeah. Well, I mean, when you're putting platform in the name, that is kind of the hope, right? Is that, this is not just going to be, like you say, a point solution, a one and done kind of thing, but the foundation of a larger partnership, broader capabilities, and just more in general.
Yeah, exactly. And I'll pitch in. So I think you've shared so much interesting information, Rick. So thank you. So I love the name, because then now we don't have to explain what it is. It's just really obvious what the product is and what the goal is. It's just to secure your OT environment. And it's nice because then we're not just talking Rockwell, but all the vendors out there, Siemens, Emerson, Honeywell, Schneider, Schweitzer, and so on. I also, like Ken said, I like that it's called platform, because it's kind of like an Easter egg. It's like what you said. It's like hinting that's not just like one piece, but multiple tools integrated into one to build that security program. And then when we're talking security program, I like what you were saying about, the big four, when someone comes along and they're looking to solve their cyber, their network, their data center problems, we can kind of help them, see that full stack solution. And with like SDO, I think the biggest value I would see is that cyber is usually seen as like a cost to the business. And so being able to partner with like SDO to help show like, how are these cyber tools also going to help you save money or save time or become more efficient? And maybe that's what's going to help you get that funding for those cyber tools that you need to make your operations more secure and make your management take a second look. So yeah, it's all really exciting. But yeah, I'll let you keep going, Rick.
No, that's a great tie-in, and I kind of wish we'd talked about SDO first and then to SecureOT, which is the S in SDO. But you did a really good tie back there for me, which is the notion of changing cyber from a dirty four-letter word or a cost center to something supportive and productive, and that's kind of what the whole SDO notion is. And the reason why I wanted to talk about that for a minute is we are part of that SDO. In and of itself, cyber is its own discipline that enables and helps that, and you need to be an expert in it, but you need to be aware of the environment within that you're operating. Now, the reason why I like what you'd said is that when I talk about the big four under the cyber hood, one of them is a consultative sort of approach. Now, we've done professional services at Rockwell for many years. We've done them at Verve as well, in the terms of somebody comes and says, I need a new network, and so you need to architect it for me and give me speeds and feeds and design it and give me IP schemes and help us cable it and put it together. But the reality is that we want to help build the whole program, because it's just a step, right? And so our consultative on the cyber side is modeled after what Calypso has brought to this game, which is an entrepreneurial sort of consultative problem solving scenario. We want to come in first, understand what you have. So our new consultative is more of a programmatic gap analysis. We can do tabletop exercises to see if you're prepared or not, and sort of expose your lack of preparedness or awareness of what you need. We can actually come in and just do a soup to nuts data gathering plus interviews and in policy and document review, et cetera. But the idea is that we have a growing capability in the leadership, the mentorship, the guiding, the building of programs, the execution of programs, meeting clients wherever they are, which then leads to the other three of the big four. And those are the most beneficial to Rockwell in terms of both stickiness, we talked about at the top of this, within the customer, and of course, again, wholly owned, and therefore we have the IP and the recurring revenue and the flexibility to continue to evolve those services as the market emerges. Of those three, we've talked about one of them. So the first is the big four, consulting is one. The other three, SecureOT is clearly one of them. And then there's two others I'll just quickly touch upon for anyone that's maybe outside of the cyber and wants to know the main components. One is called SMR, and Natalie, you'll be the acronym police for me. SMR is Security Monitoring and Response.
I believe so, yeah.
So essentially, this is our own OT SOC, or Secure Operations Center, where we're looking at data, we're bringing in live flowing information and helping our clients keep an eye on things, make sure nothing bad's happening, head off an incident at the pass, or maybe minimize its impact, et cetera. And that's a really good sticky one because we're in our clients' data, we're seeing, we're hearing, we're learning, we're giving feedback, we're showing them reports, we're helping them improve and evolve and close gaps, et cetera. The fourth one is what we call IDCs, or industrial data centers. This was the core that we launched on somewhat. I touched upon a little bit earlier. And the reason I want to go into this a little bit deeper is it touches upon something that Natalie mentioned. So an IDC is essentially a tech stack. It's some switches and servers and storage, and we offer to manage it for the client, and kind of like a infrastructure as a service. And invariably, when we go into a manufacturing site and we say, here's our price for the stack of switches and servers and cables and components and redundancy and support and follow the sun, pick up the phone if something happens, et cetera, we always get someone in IT say, I can build that stack cheaper. I've got relationships. I can go to the cloud. I can go to Dell. I can push things. I can do this better, faster, cheaper, et cetera. And this is where IT-OT convergence fails. It's because, in all due respect to my IT friends, you show them a vulnerability dashboard that we built out of a manufacturing facility, and they see bones and they say, well, I can do that. I've got those all day long. They're not necessarily understanding the environment within which it's operating, right? And so the last time we had this discussion with a large manufacturing client, IT said, well, we can do that cheaper. And we said, okay, but can you do 5 nines of uptime? Are you also able to troubleshoot and manage the manufacturing software on this stack that's actually running the plant and showing when things are going off spec or need to be adjusted or corrected? And can you answer the phone 24/7, 365 if it stops to do that? And they went, well, no. And we quickly pointed out that this type of IDC, again, managed by the single biggest collection of cyber, digital, and manufacturing experts, is actually functioning somewhat more like a profit center, because we're helping make sure that they hit their targets and their uptimes and maybe exceed them if possible, because you have someone that has built the infrastructure and understands the always-on manufacturing scenario. So it's a real pivot to say, look, we can do IT stuff in OT, but you need to truly embrace the people that understand the OT and the cyber combined, because that's a really weird and wonderful, you can do this, you can't do that, depends on the day, depends on the system, you know what I mean? So it's really, really leveraging our strengths. It's really, really highlighting, the depth and breadth of capability we have in this space. 120 some years in manufacturing, follow the sun capability, 20 some network operations and support monitoring capabilities in different cities across the globe. 27,000 people in bench strength. It's really, really quite exciting to be pivoting into this. Again, cyber is the S and SDO, but it's part of a much larger organization and initiative, and it really is hitting the market where they're begging for help right now.
Yeah, and well, I mean, that kind of touches on, and you've been like really crazy active on LinkedIn the last week or so. I don't think I've seen you show up in my notifications this much in the last year as in the last week. But but you've had a bunch of posts around this exact topic, right? Like,
yeah,
bridging that gap between the IT security expectations, OT's operational needs, bridging that gap between patching schedules and centralized control and being able to make changes in response to emerging threats versus predictability and uptime and stability, and how these models are in a lot of ways exclusive, right? How the IT model of doing things is very different from the OT model of doing things. And you really can't force one on the other in either direction without breaking almost everything.
Yeah.
But this is like that middle way, right? It's like finding the not just common ground, but finding strategies that leverage the strengths of each environment, that are sensitive to the needs of each environment, and figuring out what the path forward is in a way that ultimately supports the rest of the business, or at least, the rest of the business's technology and uptime and deliverability needs.
Yes. No, you nailed it, Ken. And the whole notion that I've always maintained an IT/OT convergence, and I've been in many heated debates on public stages and on side notes or in mail and LinkedIn. There are those who are like, don't let an IT person within 10 feet or 100 feet of my operating facility. And there's IT people that say, OT don't know what they're doing. They plug stuff in. They're dangerous. Let me take it over. The reality is it has to be somewhere in the middle. And you sort of touched upon it a bit. The notion is simply that there's too much to be done. There's too much data, but we can't do what we want to do. I mean, this has been beat to death, but just to make sure we're centered on it is that, we John and I once did a webinar on a play on that men's and women's communication book about, men are from Mars and women are from Venus or something. We did the same thing, but IT and OT, right? And if you want to just see what OT thinks, look up the ISA 99 patch urgency decision tree. It was actually chaired by our friend, Ken, Mr. Donovan Tyndall.
Right.
The Nexus, formerly of Honeywell, super, super technical OT, practitioner. And it's funny because the first thing you do is, hey, we got a vuln. Well, does it affect OT? No, keep working, ignore. And if the answer is yes, it might. The next question is there a workaround? And can we defer it? Yep. Okay, go back to work. Document, but go back to work, right? And I just highlight that because it's upside down from what IT thinks. It's not homogenous in OT. It's not all Windows 11. It's not patch on Tuesday. It's not, I don't care if this breaks your business model. It's not allowed on your laptop, so you have to find a way around this function, this security control, this restriction. And God bless the IT guys. They're the ones out there looking for us. They're the ones who, knock on wood, we haven't had an issue. And, but we have to find a way to navigate the absolutely everything versus absolutely nothing. And that's where the convergence comes in. So and back to platform. If I can show you on a platform exactly how many assets you have, and I can show you a risk score that is not an individual measure. It's not simply a list of outstanding patches, which is what a lot of people fight over in IT and OT. It's not just a list of critical vulns, which can send people down a wild goose chase. I was talking to somebody at Automation Fair, and they were told by IT they absolutely had to deal with this critical vulnerability. It was right in the core of their control system, and it controlled a room, had access to multiple networks. It was a huge deal. And so the plant operator and the local OT security were getting ready to take a shutdown and file the paperwork and notify the unions and prepare the different inputs, outputs, feed, storage, you name it. Meanwhile, somebody ran down the actual IP to look at what they were talking about. It was a printer. It was a printer they didn't need.
A printer.
Unplug the printer, use a different one, right? The context is key, right? And in this case, I mean, it was a really simple, stupid thing, right? It's just, well, it's a printer, who cares? But it starts to illustrate the notion that I can't just look at a list of phones and think, oh my God, the sky is falling. I got to get this to zero. And so to me, the power of what are we really looking at? But I need to know what I'm looking at from 5 different angles or 7 different angles. Is it a critical phone? Yeah. Is it on a critical system? Yes or no? Is it at a critical facility? Is it at a particular production line at a facility? Is that production line having an outage anytime soon? Is there a way to contain it? Do we have a backup of this system? Is it redundant? Can we run on the secondary instead of the primary? All these things that don't go into an IT routine to patch on Tuesday, but can't be answered. Like this is where you have to have a list of issues against assets. And now let's put an IT person that understands the issues and the OT person understands the assets to say, here's our path forward. And we can collectively agree to get behind this path. And sometimes we escalate and do something and take that outage, and other times we don't. But until you have the data and until you have both sides of that coin in the same room talking the same things, you'll never do what's best You may, I don't mean to say never, but you have the best possible chance of doing the most accurate and efficient things most often if you have that background and that approach.
Well, you mentioned all 5 of those considerations, and the thing that kind of came to my mind, and this was a conversation I had with a client some time ago, but it was about critical vulns. And there were critical vulns for some of their endpoints, like they had a really high CVE rating. And they were flagged as critical and all the rest. But then talking through it, at some point we realized, but the attacker would actually have to be standing at the unit.
Yep.
Right. It's not quite a 6th thing, because I'm sure that would factor into like those 5 categories you outlined, but it's that contextualization, right? It's like, okay, well, but if the attacker is standing at this HMI to effect this attack, I have larger problems.
Yes, no. And that, this is the biggest issue that you need to overcome. Like, it's like, if I have to physically be at this asset, I've got a way bigger problem. Like we talked about that once, like, if I could get to this switch cabinet here at this facility, I could plug in and get to your network. It's like, yeah, you see that giant big red button over there, it turns the whole process off and won't let me start it for 28 hours. That's an even bigger issue, right? Like that's the whole point, right? It's the context. And I said 5, but also you could be 3, it could be 8. It depends on the asset. But the point is, the more you know, the more informed you are. And more importantly, at the end of the day, like it or not, this is a negotiation. We're never going to get OT security perfectly balanced with everything patched and updated within 24, 48 hours of a patch Tuesday and latest and greatest, configurations, continuous review of user account access and permissions and network shares and data transfer and et cetera. Never. So how far do we go? Are we spending enough? Could we spend more? Should we spend more? I mean, it's going to be a diminishing return, an algorithm, a logarithmic, curve that the more money you spend, the first half you spend is going to get you from 0 to 50, but the next half you spend is only going to get you from 50 to 80, right? The next half is going to get you from 80 to 90% coverage. So, where do you stop spending? And what does done look like? How do we negotiate what done looks like? One of our clients turned on just the vuln view and they found literally 23,000 vulns. Is done 10,000 instead of 23? Is done 2,300? Well, I think the answer is conditional. Of the 10,000, are they all the product updates and notices and nice to haves, or are there critical stuff in there? Or is there some critical stuff, but it's at an outpost that's, you look at power, is it a peaker? Is it a load shed, which is important? Is it a black start, which we only use every 6 months, or when we go into an outage or something? Context is king, right? And so the more data points, 3, 5, 7, 10, 12, whatever, the better off we'll be. That's really the only way to get, to me, to truly have OT-IT convergence and to understand, on behalf of the organization and the shareholders and the investors and the employees, how far do we go? I hate to go here, but there's OT people that want to have data to go show the board that they're running 104% of the the nameplate rated capacity on systems with stuff that's so antiquated that at any time it might go. And if it does, we told you. Well, can you prove that you told me? Like, I hate that, right? Like, but if suddenly something happened and you went offline or you lost a bunch of money or something, God forbid, exploded, or hurt somebody, could we point to the fact that we lived with and accepted, a whole bunch of obsolescence and vulnerability and lack of redundancy for X years in reports? I don't know. Again, I hate a big stick. You don't sell with FUD. You don't try to scare people into doing something. But these are the things that if you're an OT guy and you say, if this goes away, this could happen from a safety perspective, a product perspective, a revenue perspective, or what have you, you're having a different discussion with IT than simply, why aren't you patching all your vulns? Because it's a printer, stupid. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, for sure. And as the regulatory environment around like what constitutes critical infrastructure continues to expand, I know in previous episodes, we've talked about like water, for example, and obviously now oil and gas are coming under that same scrutiny. As that definition of like what is critical infrastructure, and I would argue that water should be, expands, then now there's going to be that additional regulatory environment. There's going to be, so all of those decisions that you mentioned where, okay, well, we know this is there, but we're not going to do anything about it right now. We're not going to do anything about it right now. Oh, shoot, something happened. At some point, there is the potential there that that's going to go from being okay, well, we messed up, but we'll fix it and move on. It'll flip from that to being like, oh, that was criminal negligence. Oh dear.
Yeah. That's. I hope we never get there, right? But we now at least know, what's been in and out. And to your point, where, when, how, what did we do, what didn't we do? Like it all becomes a trail. And as you go back to the regulatory angle, like you were saying, like, can we demonstrate that we weren't negligent? Can we demonstrate that we did what we thought was best given the data? Well, unfortunately, a lot of regulatory comes down to, okay, you made a stance, you either acted or not. Can you prove why? Can you defend why? It's unfortunate, but that's a large part of what it is.
I thought you went off mute there, Natalie. Do you have a thought there?
Yeah, I did, but I've been trying to find a good spot to put in this comment because it doesn't exactly fit what we've been talking about, but I'm just like thinking about like our listeners who like, what is their day-to-day job? And we've been talking about like, I guess I would say like personas, like you have your IT person who's like an expert in enterprise technology and how everything's, communicating and talking. And then you have your OT persona. So you're like the person on the ground, you're in the manufacturing environment. And, depending on your experience, you might be able to, go configure a switch, flash a PLC. Maybe you'll go, work with an HMI and see why it's flashing an alert. And that, all makes sense to you. And so I'm thinking like you have people to rely on for your OT questions. You have people to rely on your IT questions. And so I think of these personas and I'm like, do you have someone in your office that you can, go ask your questions on cyber? So when something happens, like who do you go to for your, questions? And so I was thinking like with Rockwell, because I feel fortunate because I have someone to call for help all over. As Rick mentioned, he has like a huge team reporting into him just on the sales side of the organization. But our, technical team has grown so much that I feel like I have so many new friends to go ask like about compliance or about, tabletop exercises. Like I had the chance to shadow a tabletop exercise with some former military who now work at Rockwell, and they like walk through this entire scenario where I was just like flabbergasted because I didn't even think of. I'll give you like a little piece of it. It was this scenario where there was like an attack. They were mimicking an attack happening in a manufacturing environment. And they're essentially testing or stress testing their site readiness for like, what do you do when this attack happens? And they asked a lot of like, really pointed questions about, okay, what happens when this might happen? And of course, the tabletop exercise, everything goes wrong. A hurricane happens and you have no access to anything. You don't have any remote access. People can't get to the site because there's a hurricane happening. So, everything goes wrong. But it's really like that ultimate test of, your stress. And so I'm thinking like, who do these IT, OT people have to go ask these questions? And so kind of going back, we've been talking about SecureOT platform, but just kind of lifting that umbrella just to SecureOT at Rockwell. I don't know. I've just been thinking about like in the tabletop exercise, like one of the things they recommend, like printing out your kind of steps. Cause like, what if you don't have access to your, drive with all that information? And so that's why I was trying to find a place to insert this one thought. Cause I'm like, not just the platform, but kind of the overarching team is just so huge. So you have like the phone a friend for help. But I'll let Rick and kind of keep going.
It's a SecureOT people.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, but let's be clear. I don't have an army. I'm part of a collective group of people in different regions. We've got about 55 spread across North America, Latin America, Europe, and the Middle East, as well as APAC, and all of them are driving towards this notion collectively. We directly and indirectly report to the same sort of SDO organization, and so we are rowing the boat in one direction. And yes, the more the merrier, the deeper we can go. The challenge actually for us, you identify, Natalie, is sharing amongst ourselves in some of these use cases, like that IDC as a profit center I mentioned earlier, something we need to do better at. Sharing it happened in one region, we need the other regions to be aware of it, but also sharing through things like this podcast and however many people are listening. This is what we do in cyber, and I always joke that, you work at Rockwell and we make money by selling things and providing services. So guess what? You're in sales. I don't care what you do or where you do it. We're all in sales. And so the more people that know we can help with the programmatic approach, the better off we are. And Ken, I just thought of an idea is that, I'd like to do another podcast, if you're willing to have me on what I see as the evolution of security tools and security programs. I look back to when I started in like 01, 02, and a couple of years later, NERC SIP came out, and some of the things that organizations did there and the philosophy of either, making this because you introduced a regulatory, I'm going to get on that soapbox. The introducing the notion of this is a regulation, I need to get it done and put it behind me versus, okay, what are they trying to have us do? Does this make sense? Is this a benefit to me? Is it a, I don't want to call it a lifestyle, but you know what I mean? Is it a philosophical change that I should embrace? And every regulatory conference I went to, and people would stand up and do case studies, the questions would come from the audience. They come from one of those two categories. And it was, one of them was always, hey, how did you know what the bare minimum was to get done and put behind you and move on? And that, I think, leaves you short. I think that leaves you exposed. I don't think it embraces what a programmatic approach is. It leads you to buy, individual tool sets and hope to string them together. It's what I call a pop gun offense, as opposed to like truly proactively running at this stuff. And I'd be happy to dig deeper into what I call Gen 1 versus Gen 2 of security. Gen 1 being the first round of regulatory with point solutions trying to tie together, versus what we're seeing in the market, which is more of a programmatic data tied together, just like at the digital level, Factory of the Future, tying together all the security components. And to Natalie's point, being able to leverage when and where you need this expert or that, whether from the IT side or the OT. We can't patch this. Can we do some redundancy? Can we do some microsegmentation? Can we do some upstream, filtering on the packets and the ACL lists, et cetera, the control lists for the switches and firewalls? You need to be able to know where and when to turn to pull those other tools off the shelf and bring them to bear to increase your protection and your resiliency. Yeah,
absolutely. No, that'd be a great topic for the future.
Cool.
Rick, that made me think about something from my past, and this will make sense. When I was president of the Milwaukee Makerspace, we had this big discussion about culture versus rules. Mm-hmm. And
yes.
I think that's sort of the core idea behind what you were talking about as well.
Yep.
You can make a rule, and the rule is your password must be 8 characters long. And then somebody can go, oh, great, I can just put all spaces. I pushed spacebar 8 times. So then you make another rule that is, and it must contain a letter and a number. Okay, so I have 1A, 1A, 1A. So if we just focus on rules, it is very, very easy for us to circumvent those rules, for us to come up with a way that says, hey, this rule didn't apply. See, I used the letter A in here and the number 3, so it must be fine.
Yep.
So having a group that can not only understand what the rules are, but try and understand the underlying culture, the underlying goals behind those rules, and build that at a culture level. All of a sudden you say, oh, we're going to take out all of these little minuscule rules, and we're just going to say we need a culture of secure passwords. Obviously, this is a really simple example, but that's where having knowledgeable people can really help create that culture.
Yes. No. That's 100% the challenge, right? Am I obeying the letter of the law or the spirit of the law? And it is a really, really big difference to what level of compliance and capability you have. And if people don't embrace it, then, it's you'll be fighting the rule breakers all along. I think Bill Easton once I kept asking him, well, could you do this? And could you do that? I asked him to build me a feature. And he stopped and finally said, Rick, I could build you the biggest idiot-proof thing you and I had ever dreamed up, and you'd go find a bigger idiot, right? So you either embrace it or you don't, right?
Absolutely.
That's right. Well, we're coming up on time here, and this has been a remarkably enlightening discussion. So I guess mainly, thank you, Rick. And is there you've covered so darn much already, but if there was any one thing that, we haven't discussed yet, or that you want to throw out there as a good thing to just end on, now's the time.
Well, depending on the audience, what you're coming to these for and what you're trying to learn, I hope that at least, we've illustrated that the Rockwell cyber capability is impressive. It is programmatic. It is worldwide. Some of the things that we didn't get to just now, talking about Automation Fair, there's another topic I'd be happy to do is, what did we learn at Automation Fair? What are clients saying? Where are we in the journey? And what are they really wanting to consume? So we want to talk a little bit about market, at least according to Rockwell customers. Is that we're hitting something. We're hitting the nail on the head. We're starting to really dig into the pain points. But that Rockwell has a real capable security offering. And if you're not sure, ask somebody. Now, the one thing I will sort of point people towards is stay on the lookout for more of this, more of these podcasts, more enablement, more training. In fact, the Smart Manufacturing Series, which is one of the only mandatory that's company-wide. The next topic, or the March topic, is going to be cyber. So you're going to see and hear a lot of this stuff again, and learn more about it. Hopefully, helping people to be well equipped to at least ask and listen about cyber opportunities. And if you need it, phone a friend. Like I said, there's 55 of us worldwide, and there's an additional round and layer of TCs, or technical consultants rather, and solution consultants and sellers, and so cyber is a really big future and is a growth area. And I think that we're on the cusp of something that's really, really, in my opinion, I've been doing this for 25 years now, and I still go to conferences and I say stuff that I think I've been saying for 25 years, but people still nod their heads and write it down and take a picture of the slide. And I'm like, okay, there's still work to be done. But I think we've turned a corner. I think we, Rockwell, with this message, with what we're doing, with where we're going, it's resonating. The feedback from most of our customers, almost all of our customers at Automation Fair, was they love the notion of a programmatic approach, of a follow the sun support model, of a combination of people, process, and technology. So we're on to something here. I'm pretty excited.
Awesome.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, thanks for coming on. And yeah, we will definitely have to have you back, because there's a lot more there to unpack, I'm sure. And I mean,
Yes.
We did one Automation Fair debrief, but it would be great to hear about it from sort of that higher level and where it fits into this bigger picture of, SecureOT and all the rest. And then, as well, just, anytime you have insights to share, happy to have you on, or like you said, any of the reps from anywhere else around the world. And that's it for this month. You've been listening to OT After Hours, a podcast about industrial cybersecurity, why it matters, and all of the challenges that it presents. Please share our episodes with your family, friends, colleagues, and anyone else you think would be interested in industrial cybersecurity. And please consider leaving us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, Podchaser, or wherever you get your podcasts. This podcast has been produced by me, Kenneth Kully. Our opening and closing music is by the ever-so-talented Octo Sound. Look them up if you need some music for a podcast or a video. Thank you, Rick. Thank you, Lance. Thank you, Natalie. And thank you out there for listening. We will talk to you soon.